Okay, good afternoon. This is Ka Singh, one of the co-curators of the Venice Biennale 2021. And today we have the 9th webinar, held again over Zoom. And we have 4 groups of young talents with us today, including Tina and also Jasper and Matthew from Europe. Hello.
Hi.
And then after this group, we will have Ken and Oscar from No Boundary Architects sharing their work with us. Hi, Ken and Oscar. And next we will have Nikki from Not Architects.
Hi.
Yeah, with representation on her artwork titled 18 Portals. And last but not the least, we have Dawn, assistant professor from the University of Hong Kong, to share with us his work, Secret Theater. Okay, as this webinar only lasts for about 1 hour, so I think we should better start earlier, then we can spare some time for discussion. Still, you can share with us any of your questions through typing in the chat box, and I will keep checking on it. And in case your question is interesting and provoking, I'll definitely raise it onto our presenters. Okay, so without further ado, I'll pass the time to Tina, Jasper, and Matthew on their work exploring future Hong Kong.
Thank you. Just to check, you can see my screen, I hope. Yes. All right, so thank you for that. And yeah, so our installation is called Exploring Futures Hong Kong. So before diving into exactly what do we mean by that, I first of all thank for the team for this opportunity online, but also actually for all the efforts, because it has been such a challenging year. So all the efforts online, offline, in Hong Kong, in Italy, and elsewhere. I think it's a great support, and also for us very encouraging to know that you always have our backs and try your best to make sure we can present our work in many different ways and many different occasions. So yeah, as mentioned, our team is a combination of 3 colleagues from Arab. So you can see on screen we have YLM. He's currently not here, but we have Matthew. Matthew, you want to unmute and say hi or wave?
Sure. Hi, I'm Matthew, urban designer in Arab Hong Kong, and looking at developments in and around Hong Kong, China, Southeast Asia.
Yeah, and then we have Tina Lam and Kes Lam. So those 2 are sisters, as you might have guessed. So Tina is with us today as well. So Tina, maybe you can also unmute and say something.
Yes, I'm Tina, Hong Kong visual artist, and I do paintings and drawings. Yes. But now, today, I will do the models. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. So my own name is Jasper Hilkhuizen. I'm also from Arab, so similar as Matthew, I'm urban designer, but with a focus now for the past years on sustainable development. And maybe just as the first kick of the reason why at least we from Arab joined, and I guess it's similar for me and Matthew because we both come from the Netherlands, both have an architectural background, so quite familiar with the Venice Biennale because it's not too far away from Netherlands itself. So for us, of course, when we were asked to join, we're very excited because the Biennale itself, of course, always highlights key challenges and opportunities. But moreover, we thought it so interesting because always it provides room to explore and to dream. And I think that was very interesting. And I think what was an extra layer that we didn't foresee happening at the time was that we actually had to work together with Tina. So I think we're very lucky that Tina and Kes were part of our team and really helped us also to kind of expand their own horizon and to just do something different from before. So our work, Hong Kong, a composition of water, land, and city. So that's kind of the basis for how we worked as a team. So we really think that those 3 elements, water, land, and city, is really something that's so unique for Hong Kong as compared to any other city in the world. And actually what you see on screen is this sketch, I think, or a beautiful illustration, I can say. It's the work of Tina, and it kind of captures our first thinking about how those 3 different elements are creating this continuous experience in the city. The one cannot go without the other, and no matter where you are in Hong Kong, you always get the sense of all 3 combined, we feel. So actually we transformed this what I can say, poetic graphic into the base map of what for us became a starting point for exploration to understand some of the current and future conditions of Hong Kong. And what we try to do in a series of maps and other illustrations is trying to capture what makes Hong Kong so unique, what are key qualities, and what key challenges lie ahead. So in this presentation, we'll just go a bit through what those are, and then I'll give the word to Matthew, who will talk about what we identified as 3 unique scapes in the city. And then afterwards, Tina will present more on the physical models, because I think it was important to know for the people that are listening. So our exhibit actually contains out of 2 parts. We had a video, and we have 3 physical models. But of course, all 2 are coming from the same starting point, and they're integrated as well, which you'll hopefully realize at the end of the presentation. So just to highlight some of these key challenges, right, that we discussed as a team, which I think are so unique to Hong Kong. That first of all, it's the element of water. So you might not know that, or you might, I'm not sure, but I didn't know at least that Hong Kong exists out of 261 islands. And the coastline has a total length of 733 kilometers. So it's really significant, especially since Hong Kong has a relatively small territory. So these numbers for us underpin the important relationship that the city has with water. Now, at the same time, 40% of Hong Kong's land is country park or a nature reserve. So that's really the element of land. And what I find interesting from my own personal view is that before I came to Hong Kong, I never realized that Hong Kong was so green and that it's such a perfect place to go hiking, to go camping, to do water sports, because all I knew was, okay, it's a cityscape, it's super dense, and that's it. But actually, after being here for now 8 years, and I think Matthew, more or less the same amount of years, we both actually appreciate both those sides, the city, but also the landscape itself. And the landscape, of course, is more than just hills. It's also the great biodiversity on the land, but also on the water that Hong Kong includes. I mentioned already a little bit about the build-up area. So only less than 25% of Hong Kong's land is developed. And as you can see already a little bit in the background, of course, this also creates this very hard edges between city and landscape, like this super dense area, and then suddenly you have those green, clearly marked areas, which again is such a clear characteristic of the city. And I mentioned already this density, but what is very clear is that Hong Kong is one of the most densely populated cities in the world. And this compactness, you can say, has advantages in terms of mobility, walkability, and perhaps also making it attractive to tourists. At the same time, it also causes challenges, of course, as we all know, such as overpopulation and cramped living conditions. And actually, if you look a bit into the future, the population of Hong Kong actually will only grow, mainly due to an aging population. So the latest estimate from the Census and Statistics departments is that the current population of 7.3 million is likely to increase to 8.1 million in 20 years. So they also, of course, will have an influence on how these 3 different elements of the city are going to coexist. So with this being a background, our team started exploring, so what is the future of Hong Kong scapes? So what did we identify as scapes? Let me try to see if this video works. We identified the cityscape, so the urban areas, the urban fabric, the landscapes, the country parks, the hills, on the green fields, but also, of course, Hong Kong's waterscapes, so Victoria Harbour, and all the scenic water elements. So what we try to understand is how these different scapes actually reflect on the 3 themes that are part of the Venice Biennale, so the themes of land, people, and environment. And without trying to be too academic or scientific, we kind of try to capture some of our thinking in this diagram. So land covers infrastructure and density. People covers habitable space conservation. Environment is about urban green and protection. And we try to understand, do we need more of these? Is there no change, or do we have less? So that's my introduction part. Let's move over to Matthew.
Thanks, Jasper. I'll just say next slide for the next slide. Under 3 scapes, we try to explore how these might change in the future, and change because we will live under different climatic conditions, because our population will get older, and many other aspects, so that we can rethink and dream. And I think explore and dream is really the key words for our installation on what these scapes could include. And I'll walk you through each of these and influences that we noticed that each of those scapes have. First on the waterscape. Next slide, please. And of course, one of the key things that we'll need to deal with in the future is thinking about how climate change will make us more vulnerable for flooding, and how areas of the city and therefore people living in those areas might have disruptions, and might have livelihood disruptions, and how the city need to adapt to those things. So that means that we might need to rethink on how we deal with habitable space or how we deal with infrastructure, actually. But also, if some of those spaces become less desirable, how do we deal with, for instance, density? Density, because we live in such a interesting topographical environment with slopes and hillsides, how density will actually be affected by areas affected by flooding. And next slide, please. And you might know, or you might not know, is that, of course, reclamation has always been one of the major forms of Hong Kong to create habitable space. This has been since many years already the main driver behind creating habitable spaces. And this is, of course, because of the difficult topography that we're dealing with, but it's also because the way we value our landscape. So this displays the interaction between environment, land, and people, between waterscape, landscape, and the cityscape. And next slide, please. And of course, the future, there are there are projects in the pipeline for future creation of habitable spaces, and whether or not they will happen or in which format is a question for all of us. But it will need to respond to climatic changes in the future. And it might bring us benefits also. It might relieve pressure on urban greening. It might provide habitable spaces, or actually improve our infrastructure network, more resilient to future climate events such as heat stress or increased rainfall, for instance. Next slide. What you see is that thinking about dreaming those spaces, we need to think of how we react to those, and how our, for instance, our coastlines might change, how our waterscape might change. We've done that through video, but also through 3D, through physical models, which we'll look at in some later slides. Next slide, please. Also on the landscape side, this is quite an important aspect, of course, because already in the initial sketch with the curvy lines, we are aware that topography plays a very important role in looking at distribution of land in Hong Kong. We might also need to think of ways to both conserve valuable areas, but also ways to deal with how can we make optimal use of those spaces. And some way to think about that is looking at, are there possibilities to free up land by locating some of the less desirable elements, for instance, underground. And that could be in hillsides, or that could be underground under parks, for instance, or in other areas. So we make more efficient use of land. And by doing that, providing, for instance, a better greening environment or more habitable space, or, for instance, improvements in infrastructure as well, as we need to accommodate also an increasing population demand. Next slide. And one of those aspects that that is important in discussing about this topic is, where do we draw lines? Where do we draw a line between saying valuable or potential to solve our problems? And the line between green and built areas has always been a debatable a cause for debate in Hong Kong because of its topography, because of its density, and because of its environment as well. And this argument plays an important role, will become even more important in the coming years as well. Next slide. And thank you. And Cityscape, definitely not the last topic to think about as well. As you can see on the next slide, we are also dealing with a building stock that is in some parts getting older, with all the consequences that holds, and opportunities to actually look at that aging building stock in terms of improving the quality of our city, the living quality, providing more or better spaces, and of course dealing with people, which is the most important part of creating a habitable environment, thinking about improvements in living conditions. Next slide. And next to all those things, of course, also the way we build our livelihood, whether that is in a vertical way in offices, or if that is in a more horizontal way in brownfields. We need to think of how those areas will be affected in the future because of the previously mentioned items, and if there is a better way to look at the spaces that we have and reconsider the balance between people, environment, and built up areas. And next slide. And that might lead us to rethink about densities, about the way we look at verticality in our cities, or the way we look at our buildings as well. And we've explored some of those concepts in a series of models, and Tina will tell you a little bit more about the models. Over to you, Tina.
Thanks. Our model, the initial idea of this model came from one of my night drawing, because I like to draw the abstract drawings. This drawing could be the meaning of wave and water, or contour lines of the map. I think it's good to illustrate our topic of environment. And after that, I tried to make the drawing from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. We use a very common materials in our daily life, which is paper, and very soft, but we group together and make it very hard. And we did make experience of how paper could be shaped and reformed. You can see that in this, I try to group two waves together and try to make it's like a facade of the building. And this one is like a spoon, yes. And this one is like a cone, yes. And waterscape model is it's like a folding island, I think. Yes, you can just let it fold on the water wherever you like. Yes, and we focus on the shape and the space we create, and yes, I think is now at the density of the population in Hong Kong is very high. It's good idea to folding the other way. Yes. And also we make the video. I think it's good to make the balance live with the lateral. Yes.
Let me help you. Just don't click.
Okay.
I'll click. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. The second model, Cityscape model, the shape is like leaves. Yes. And so we are thinking to make leaves on the roof, and then people can see the sky, because now we can't see the sky. The building is so high. Yes. And imagine the space, the people inside the model, the spaces is very dramatic. Yeah. Yes, we also play the shadows, the shadow with the models. And the videos with the shadows. We are thinking the sun come from the east to the west. Yes. This is the video with the beautiful models. Just yeah, okay. The last model is about the landscape model. We group the leaves together and try to make it like a mountain. Yes. Because we don't want to disturb the landscape, the contour line or the, yeah. So we try to use the lateral form to make the model. Yes. Thank you, Jasper.
Oh, thanks, Ina. So maybe to wrap up a little bit. So for us, the overall intention of our installation was to engage the audience into imagining possible scenarios and reflecting the struggle between land, water, and the city. And it was our ambition to create something that can show visitors a glimpse of the city's characteristics and challenges. And rather than really providing solutions, we really want to try to trigger thoughts. So whether you're an architect, artist, resident, or just passerby, just make sure people get inspired and they can give their own interpretation of whatever that map or that model means. Of course, maybe just a few words that we truly enjoyed working together as a team of urban designers, city planners, and artists. And definitely all our thanks to the Hong Kong Institute of Architects, Biennale Foundation, and the Hong Kong Arts Development Council for providing us the opportunity to share our work. So that's our sharing for today. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tina, Jasper, and Matthew. Yeah, you guys must note that this is a group without any architect at all, but they have been very welcome to be part of this Biennale. So yeah, and it is also excited for us to see how different experts see the cityscape and the issues we are encountering in Hong Kong. Yeah, thanks very much. And next, I'll hand over the time to Ken and Oscar from No Boundary Architects to present their works. Yeah.
Yep. Hello.
Hi, Ken.
Can you guys see my screen? So,
yeah.
I think this is better.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's worthwhile. So I'm Ken from No Boundary Design, and together with me, we have Oscar. We're actually cousins, and we're both registered architect from the HAIA. So I think before we start, it's worthwhile to mention that Noble, Lot, and Hong Kong U. So obviously Nikki and Don, we are originally in the same group under lands distribution. So even though we have a very different looking sort of projects, we kind of, but we do have some kind of connection. Worthwhile to, I think, just quickly mention is that we try to investigate the sort of distribution of land in Hong Kong through different scales. So I think mine is more about one-to-one, so it's like a human scale. And then Nikki has a more zoom out version, and then Don has obviously a much more zoom out version. So we're through different scale, we will, as a group, even though through different project, talk about the distribution of land, and of course, for the other project, the designer will be more in detail explained to you. So okay, so back to our project. Our project is Transit. So as we were saying, it's you know, it's a sort of one-to-one installation project done by us. So we are Noble. Noble is kind of like a name we share, or like a platform we share when different type of architects and designer or artists, sometimes sound artists in some other projects, we used to do mostly installation and works around the world. So we did one work in the south of France in Montpellier 2 years ago, and last year, obviously, the Venice Biennale, and some other works now that in Hong Kong as well. If you like, you can follow our Instagram, you will know more. Okay, so to approach to this Transit, or this last year's Biennale, we really try to look at the question, how will we live together in Hong Kong in a very detailed manner. So how will we live together is a question that we find it quite strange to ask. So it's very importantly is to ask, so there is a will, there's a we, and there's a Hong Kong. So will to us is, you know, implying some kind of timeline, you know, so it's not now, it's in the future, but when, you know, when, what are we talking about? When are we talking about? And we, implying there are, you know, different people, you know, it's not one group of people, but maybe two groups, or maybe, you know, two type of people, and then who, right? And Hong Kong is very importantly, you know, Hong Kong is the Hong Kong we know, and it's from our profession as an architect, is to how we see Hong Kong as a place. I think these are the questions and elements that if we want to dissect this question or to answer this question is something that we would like to explore. And also we also think about, you know, who will ask this question, how will we live together? Is it somebody who wants to live together but don't know how to live together, they ask this question, or somebody who doesn't want to live together but somehow forced to live together asking this question, you know, like who is asking who, you know? This is the kind of scenario that we're facing, I think, in order to answer this. So first of all, the will, so the time. So I think in general, Hong Kong is a very unique city, and throughout the past, I think 150 years, there are numerous, you know, numbers of changes, you know, from, you know, obviously from a very political point of view, you know, the change of the government to, you know, the rapid, in a very political sense, or in a city development point of view, obviously, you know, the massive development of the cityscape, introduction of, you know, the MTR, blah, blah, blah. All of these changes imply some sort of impact to our life. And I think to us, the will is something that we face, it's the timeline that we face before certain type of changes, you know. And I think we did this job, I think 2 years ago. So it was a time of, you know, some kind of change, you know. We're not trying to capture any specific incident in the society, but I think in general, Hong Kong is a constantly changing city. And this is the moment in terms of time that we would like to sort of capture to answer the question, how will we live together? And I think Oscar would like to talk about the we.
Thank you. Yeah, so actually when we first got asked this question, we went through a lot of, you know, different ideas and scenarios. And if you can, you know, referring to this slide before, it was really like, it was a very iconic moment for Hong Kong, discussing the future. And it's just a simple picture of two people sitting together. and having a chat. And then we started to look at maybe we can just think about creating a seat. I think arguably it's probably the smallest scale that you can really experience this identity of we. So on the left, you can see a picture of an elderly couple in Hong Kong, kind of scrunched together, sitting together, but they're very, one's very happy. I don't think the other one's probably thinking about something else. And then a picture of you know, like something we experience every day, you know, sitting together on the MTR. Maybe, you know, maybe there is an underlying story, and these pictures helps paint a narrative of answering the question how we as, you know, two people at the, you know, at this scale, how we live together. So yeah, so maybe we'll go to the next slide. And then also Hong Kong. So I think Hong Kong means different things to many different people. We have, you know, the you know, the iconic central skyline, you know, where we see the, you know, the tallest buildings, and then also, you know, like a great melting pot of like Western and Eastern cultures, and just this amazing, you know, like shopping and dining destination. But Hong Kong also means, I guess this, you know, as architects, you know, this amazing living space, this super modern, I guess, mega development in terms of like residential developments that kind of sprawl across the all over Hong Kong, like not just the new territories, but like, you know, say, if you look at the development of Hong Kong, like the creation of the new towns, and all of this kind of reflects back to the overall development. And I guess capturing this density is also an important aspect when we start to think about you know, what it is, you know, what Hong Kong means. And this seats should also capture some type of density or this, you know, sharing like a smaller space. Yeah, and then I'll give it back to Ken to explain some more.
So I think, you know, how where we live together is to us is a sort of, you know, like a 4-dimensional study. You know, there's a timeline, there is an objects, and there is a place. You know, so whether it is, you know, two people sharing, two group of people sharing, two, you know, very different two cities sharing, you know, I think at the end of the day, the analogy is the same. You know, it's about, you know, how we, you know, mostly people with different sort of background or different sort of opinions or different sort of typology, you know, sharing one space. You know, this is the kind of thing that we're doing together. We're trying to explore. So putting in a very diagrammatic kind of analogy, you know, this formation of our work, you know, started with, you know, obviously, you know, we have, as we mentioned, you know, two type of an entity, you know, sort of imagining. Can you see my mouse? Sorry, you can see my mouse, right?
Yes, I can see.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like a chair. Like imagine this is like a very basic device to share, like a chair, right? So so there are different colors of entities representing, you know, obviously the two groups or two people with different, you know, backgrounds, and then obviously facing different direction at the first phase. So this from the left, we read from the left. So they're back to back for the first stage. And then somehow, you know, they are gelling together, you know, moving towards each other. And then the second phase is kind of like, you know, back to back again, but closer. And then it gets sort of closer and closer, trying to twist, you know, initially opposing direction to the same direction in the middle. So I think this is the sort of, you know, back to the first how will we live together is the sort of timeline. I think Hong Kong is sort of constantly phasing, there are changes there. Somebody has to move, somebody has to kind of compromise, somebody have to sort of undergo some changes. I think there will be a situation, something like that, or on the other way around. If you read from the left from the middle to the right, it is sort of like, if you have the same direction, sort of splitting the other way around, we will experience this kind of overlapping situation, somehow awkward situation that is represent this transition, and therefore transeats is the name that we use to sort of capture this sort of transitioning sort of awkwardness when people share their space. So this is the object that we did at the end of the day. It's a one-to-one sort of, we use the image of a park bench as an example. Just try to capture the moment, the sort of awkward moment that we think we're facing at the moment in Hong Kong. This can be applied to, the shortage of land, the moment that the moment that when we're in the MTR every morning, how we're sharing this space, very, reaching to the same destination, yes, efficient, yes, but is it like a comfortable experience? This is the kind of thing that we try to sort of capture, so two people sitting on there, and then yes, you can sit on it, but is it like, what about enjoyment? What about comfort? What about it is a functional chair at the end of the day, but this is something that we would like to ask people to think about. And I think before we finish, for this project, No Boundary Design collaborated with another company. It's called Hong Kong Hardwood. Shout out to Philip. He's not here today, but he is kind enough to be our sponsor and helper to create this bench. So this is a one-to-one park bench made of teak. So initially it was supposed to be put in Venice, outdoor. We have one side covered with coating, the other one kind of raw. So we were hoping, in the course of 3-6 months, right? There will be some weathering, happening. So there will be more like a canvas to see this sort of subtle changes between the two. But obviously now we can't do that. So it's hopefully one day we can show this in an outdoor environment so that we can capture the weathering. So the question we would still ask people is, or visitors or everybody, is like, how we will live together after this study. This is still not an answer, more like a sort of response. We don't have an answer to that, more like a response through our work. Last but not least, please follow us on Instagram. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken and Oscar, for your explanation on the concept behind this bench. And yes, there will be a chance for the bench to get deteriorated and sort of exposed to the weather when we have the physical exhibition at the City Gallery soon. I think it will start in October. Yeah, so please stay tuned. Yeah. So after the second group, we have the third entity. We have Nikki with us from Lots Architects. Nikki, you ready to share with us your design concepts?
Sure. Let me try to. Can everyone see this?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Thank you, Ka-shing, for the introduction. So I'm Nikki Ho, the director of Lot Architects. We're actually a group of young Hong Kong architects and designers. And for this project, we collaborate with 18 local residents for the exhibits. I'll explain a bit about how we collaborate later on. And a little bit introduction of our company. It's we kind of specified design for architecture in interior, where we try to discover like different stories with our different projects. The name of our company, LOT, means language of thoughts. So yeah, that's about a little bit introduction of us. And this is actually our second time to join the Venice Biennale as well. We're actually quite happy to have this chance. And for this year, the the theme for the exhibition is redistribution, land, people, and environment. We draw the attention to the questions that how we live together as well. Like in Hong Kong, we have the land shortage, the migration problem, the climate changes problem background. We try to rethink about the three resources, the land, the people, and the environment, how they distribute in Hong Kong. So as Ken has mentioned, we fall into the same group with Dawn from Hong Kong U and Ken and Oscar. And our three different pieces look at different scale of Hong Kong, and our models look at a more macro perspective. And Ken's one is more like one-to-one scale. We are looking at a more macro cityscape. So our team has created this exhibition through looking at the 18 districts of Hong Kong. And we start by researching through the data, like we extract the data from Hong Kong government census. We find out the population density, the average living area, and the number of like subdivided units, how many people are living in those like small, very super small living units in each district, and compare these data that we found and reflect in our installation. So we try to visualize all these like kind of cold blood real data to a more three-dimensional, a physical model to visualize all this data. And we make it like the cone size, the diameter of each cone, like each cone is representing each district of Hong Kong, and the diameter of each cone represents the density of each district, and the length of the cone is the population of the district and the number of people, how many people are living in those like subdivided units. So the shape and the size of each cone really diverse from district to district. So we create each cone with from these data to realize it into a piece that people can like physically touch it or physically engaging in these like pretty virtual data that we cannot have a sense of it. And we also try to evoke people's, like the viewers' emotions and feelings towards these art pieces through like text. We use different texture, different material graphics, and apply different stories to each district, like each cone, from the inside and outside of the cone. For instance, like we use the like very iconic Hong Kong, like traditional material and the pattern from the Hong Kong, the nylon bag texture to apply to this to the installation. So it's make it more localized, like revoking the memories of Hong Kong people, how the tradition is applying to these pieces. And this piece is also intended to view at a 360 degree, like people can actually walk around the piece and look inside into each cone, and they can feel the different sizes of each cone. It's a more engaging and more dynamic way how people can see those like virtual or like uneasy to understand data. So this is our actual piece, which we hopefully can be exhibited later on, as Ka-shing has mentioned. So beyond all these visualizing data, we also would like to introduce the human side or a human touch and some stories to the exhibit, like how people really live and how people really feel about the place. So we introduce 18 Hong Kong residents who really live in those areas, who really live in those districts for a long time. And we engaging them to join our exhibits So we interview these people and we ask them to take the photos of each district where they live, like what part of the district they like, they dislike, how they live in that area. We interview the people. We have them to take the photos that they think can represent the area that they live in. So we collect all these stories and photos, and we put these photos like a montage way into different district homes. So we can have a glimpse of each district, like how the diverse cityscape, landscape, or like the waterscape that Arab has mentioned. We actually find out that Hong Kong has a diverse landscape or view throughout Hong Kong. Not only the like everyone knows about the high rises landscape of Hong Kong, but actually Hong Kong has a diverse different phases or different building typology in Hong Kong, like the historical buildings, country parks, the new territories, low-rise houses, open space, promenades. They're actually, like from all these photos we collected, there are a very diverse views of Hong Kong that we find out. So maybe I can like talk about like one or two of these like more interesting stories. Say, Jamie has lived in Central District for 13 years. She find out it's like a very convenient, very like historical and modernized, like two things combined district for her. She still find it like a bit too commercial, but she's like district, she enjoys a lot about the district. And you can see from like another district, it's Jasmine from Eastern District. It's a more like a residential area, or like the Kowloon City District that Tamiko we interviewed, that she find out it's a very like low rise, all residential apartment blocks, very torn out, very old. And nearby Kai Tak, because of the high restriction, so all the buildings in Kowloon City, like mostly are pretty low compared to the Hong Kong center. So it's quite interesting to like look through all these stories from different people that we have engaged. So we kind of put all these different images into our cones so the audience or the viewers, they can actually explore different districts through viewing into different cones. So it's a more interactive way of like how people can engaging into the exhibits. So these are more of the district that we have inputted into the exhibits, like Lemma Island, the Northern Districts, the Sai Kung, and Sha Tin, like Sun Shui Po. So we can see like a really diverse images from Hong Kong. Yep. So our intention for this piece is to put into Venice, where people may not know too much about Hong Kong. So through this piece, they can have a sense of how things are distributed in Hong Kong and the diversity of Hong Kong. So for the overall, for the piece, if it's like the shape or the cones are talking about the density and population of each district. So the more uneven of this exhibit, the more uneven of these resources are distributed. So the audience can explore the situation of Hong Kong and understand the stories behind the city. So we're more intent to inspire the people, or instead of like giving a solution to the question that raised. So yeah, so that's it. Yeah, this is our piece. And we like really thank again for the curator group and the organizer for this chance and opportunities.
Thank you very much, Nikki, for your presentation. I can see that noble architects, lots architect as well as Donna is actually approaching this question: how do we live together in a very people way, in a very humane way? So let's pass the time to Dawn and to explore more about how you guys have interpreted this question. Over to you, Dawn.
Thank you, Kassing, and just thank you, everyone. It's been really interesting talk so far. I would like also to thank HKIA and the curators for making this platform available to us. I think it's a really exciting group and a really exciting work that we've seen so far. I'd also just have a shout out to say to Paul and Hayne behind the scenes. I think have been really amazing support throughout the whole process. I know it's not been very easy for you guys, so I think thanks a lot for all of that. The coordination has been really, really great. I'm just going to share my screen. So I guess we talked about scale and thinking about Hong Kong and its urban spaces from that point of view, from looking at the internet and from the district, and then from somewhere in between or somewhere beyond with this project. This project, I guess, starts with some research work. And maybe I'll just use this time to introduce myself a little bit. My name is Don Holohan. I'm an assistant professor here at HKU. I teach architecture to masters and undergraduate students. But originally I'm from Ireland, across the world, a small island on the edge of Europe. And now I live here for the last 7 years on a small island at the edge of China. Very different, but in some ways very similar, both villages. So this project, I guess, began as a research work here at HKU, which was looking at public space in Hong Kong and how it's used and how we think about that space, who uses it, who occupies it. Sorry, it should play. And those sort of questions. So what we have done over the course of, say, the last 2 years, or at least 3 years, maybe now, it's an ongoing project, a slow building project, is to study Hong Kong's residual spaces, or the spaces between the sort of defined areas or defined programs in Hong Kong. And we've been doing that, I guess, with an idea to understand the potentials for action. And this project has its genesis, as I said, in an interest in public realm and people and space in Hong Kong, but also in technology. And my work here in the University of Hong Kong is really at that intersection between technology, building culture, how we make things, and place, and how those things affect each other. And that's really the beginnings of this project. And so Hong Kong is really unique, and I was really excited for a chance to study it. And you know, it's one of the densest urban areas in the world, and we all know this. And I think it's interesting from the first presentation that while there's a lot of development land, that land is sort of somewhat compressed between the ocean and the sea. But it's also constrained by notional or more academic ideas of zoning or use or land use with sort of inbuilt ideology as to how we would use the land, and which has really shaped the verticality of the city and the density of the city. Of course, with density, and again, this is the topic that was raised earlier, there's some constraints and conditions that arise with that, and that especially is sort of finely or felt or attuned when we think about public versus private space and how we use the city and interact with the city as citizens. And what there is space for in the city and what there isn't. So there's an idea that over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that more and more public space, inverted commas, has been given over to private interests with conditions, that we have to allow walkways through certain buildings. Malls have been given right-of-ways or passageways, which are defined as public space. But for casual observers, or for people who wanted to do or use that space in new or innovative ways, I guess are constrained by the fact that they're in or controlled by private interests. So how we use the city and who owns it and who benefits from the public spaces, and how we could potentially become more activated or use our city in different ways became the question of this workshop. And I guess what's constraining that development, what's constraining that spontaneous occupation and use of public space for cultural purposes, I guess, is that indeterminacy in terms of ownership, who owns, how they own it, how can we negotiate between different stakeholders and different groups, but also technology and legislation. Hong Kong, as you can see through some of these images, is incredibly dense space, incredibly unique. Nothing is square. It's layered. The city is a palimpsest that's been layered with building over years and years and years. There's no straight edges, and spaces are in between, and the public spaces are really idiosyncratic. So occupying those spaces and using those spaces is a drawing challenge, is a technical challenge, and not just in terms of the program, but in terms of how we actually occupy those spaces. So while we're thinking about public space, we're also investigating this new technology, which is Lidar scanning. And we were imagining how just by knowing our environment better, by understanding, by sensing the environment, what potentials would that open up to us in terms of installation or occupation of a public space. So we put together a small group in a workshop, which took place over 1 week, with the goal of using this technology and the speed and accuracy that it brings in defining a space to create a temporary cultural occupation of a public space in Hong Kong. And students proposed from the first day an idea of a theater or a cinema, or they wanted to make and show and film that they had produced themselves about Hong Kong and to watch it. So the workshop premise was, could we build, occupy, design, construct, use a building or make a building in 1 week? Would the technology allow us to do that? That's both a digital fabrication challenge and a sensing, scanning, and survey challenge, actually. So over the course of that week's first couple of days, students took the equipment and walked around Hong Kong and found those spaces which they felt were really interesting or could potentially house an activity like this. There are nebulous spaces, again, indeterminate in terms of their ownership, back alleyways, under staircases, at the edge of developments, places that were unconsidered or unthought of when development was happening. And so there's this process of scanning and capture and thinking about public space, and then also an idea of building. So using this sort of information, this digital information, students then began to design within the point cloud environment, thinking about how we could use the power of digital fabrication technologies, new technologies, in terms of digital design, to actually fabricate a structure which was precisely, not generic, but precisely tailored to a specific environment and a specific program. And this is what they did. So in 3 or 4 days, we had the structure designed and prefabricated, and in day 4 or day 5, we had everything assembled on a rooftop, ready to go. And it was interesting that none of those, even though it looks like a standardized structure, none of those elements are the same length. All the fabric is cut precisely to match a particular site, which was in the end a site underneath a staircase, a public staircase in Pound Lane in the center of Hong Kong. I'm sure many of you know this space, and if you don't, it's a very, very well used thoroughfare, pedestrian thoroughfare, which links Hollywood Road to Bonham Road, just west of central Hong Kong. And so over the course of one evening, we built and housed and created the structure underneath that staircase, which gives the name of the installation, but also the name of the project, the Secret Theater. So this idea that, you know, we could, or students, people, we could think about and occupy the city in new and imaginative ways, empowered by this technology, which in some way moves faster than the legislation it should surely conform under if we were going to do this, you know, through standard channels. So in some ways, it's a provocation to that system. And again, this is the sort of the finished work. So then, in terms of what we had thought about for this presentation of this work and the provocation that it sort of engenders, we had thought to sort of build a device, another theater where we could incorporate that sort of question. And this is what the project we developed and designed for the Venice Biennale is. So itself is a box, a secret theater, a device for viewing and examining point clouds and manipulating the models that are within those spaces. So there's something to this new type of information that we've created. does not lend itself to traditional forms of architectural representation, the drawing section and the plan. Instead, it's a tactile, even though it's made of light and it's a digital representation, it's a tactile and a spatial object. So we wanted to house that spatial object. So we designed and developed a 3D holographic projector and an armature that would enable you to manipulate that information and data. So hopefully you can see it behind me. Hopefully when we get a chance to present this project, you'll be able to view and manipulate the point clouds information and see it in three dimensions, not like a flat image like this, but to look at it and treat it as a model, but a model built of light. And just to show maybe a little bit, again, how this information doesn't really lend itself to the traditional image. You know, these fragments and these maps and patterns that are produced are a new form of architectural representation in some way, which, you know, have a context, and we're interested in exploring and representing that. And I think in the interest of time, I'll try and lock it up at there. And if you guys have any questions on it, I'm happy to take them. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to work together.
Thank you very much, Don, for your presentation, which doesn't only involve the sculpture itself, but definitely the show which has created. And I think every one of us will be dying to see the show soon. Yeah. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to type your question in the chat box, but I do have one for every one of you. So today we see how you guys have interpreted the question, how will we live together, and the redistribution, land, people, environment in different ways, like with data, with understanding of the cityscape, the waterscape, as well as involving the public, involving students, young talents, etc. So after this study, what do you think are the most critical issue that we are encountering in Hong Kong right now? Talking about issue, that could be a problem, that could be a phenomenon, that can also be a situation. Yeah, what do you think is the most critical one that has to be tackled as soon as possible? How about Matthew?
Thanks for that. I think what is very interesting, what we saw a few times in all the presentations today, and also from our experience working on this project, is the benefit that it can bring in thinking together about a solution. As you could see in the chair, which highlights the sensitivity around sharing a space together, and the spatial relations that relate to it, but also in observing the 18 portals and observing the public spaces, and I think that togetherness is one of the key elements in thinking about current issues and future solutions for that. And it's something that I think relates to being open to dreaming about possible solutions, not only from one perspective, but from all our perspectives together. And I think that's my takeaway on that.
Mm-hmm. So be creative, be innovative, and go for your dream. Yeah. And of course,
absolutely, always ambitious.
Yeah, it's like the Olympic spirit. Okay. How about Ken and Oscar? What do you think?
So I think I think your question was what is the biggest problem that we're facing?
Yeah, you can see it that way.
Well, I think there are multiple layers of problems, but I think specifically from maybe like a city planning or architectural professionally top point of view, I think I don't, well, maybe the distribution, we focus too much. I think Oscar and I was having this conversation yesterday. I think in general, Hong Kong focus a lot on efficiency, you know, like how to fit so many people in such a small place, how to move so many people from A to B, you know, through like a mega bus, mega train, you know. But, you know, oftentimes I think it seems to be luxury to think about enjoyment and comfort, you know, which I think, I mean, obviously people from other Netherlands, Matthew and Jasper would know, you know, if you want to come, say, for example, you live in Europe, you can decide to bike from A to B to work, for example. But in Hong Kong, you don't really have that kind of choice. And then, you know, the places you live in Hong Kong versus, I mean, it's a cliche that we all live in a sort of shoebox apartment, but at the same time, and obviously you can find your way to enjoy your space. But at the same time, I think a lot of the responsibility should go to the planner as well as the architect. You know, like, are we looking at efficiency, or are we looking at from the tenants or like the user's point of view, the enjoyment of it? I think yeah, put in a nutshell, that would be my answer.
I guess to complement Ken's answer, not just the balance between efficiency and enjoyment, but also I guess the point we chose like a public bench is also to situate ourselves in the public space. And I think that, you know, the Hong Kong public spaces there's room for improvement for the public spaces that we have in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. The design of public spaces, 100%.
Yeah. How about Nikki? What do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, Nikki, you have to unmute yourself.
Right. Hi. Yeah. To write on like Ken's response, I think like a city's development, there are like hard factors and soft factors. I think like architects used to put like a lot of focus or attention to the hard factor, like how to build the infrastructure, the buildings of the cities. I think we need more attention to the intangible, like soft factors, like the cultural, the social aspect of the cities. Say, for instance, it's very easy to build a bicycle track. Like how to build a bicycle track, it takes like a few months maybe, but how we can educate the people, like it takes a long time to have that culture, like a cycling culture in Hong Kong. So I think we may need to have a more diverse group of people, including architect, land planner, landscape designer. A multidisciplinary team should be set up with the local government, like community-based organization, like private sector, like all these people should come together to think about the hard factor and the soft issues of the cities. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, it's your turn, Don.
Okay, I don't know. I think that maybe just from our experience over the last couple of years, I think it's redefining or rethinking how we can reclaim our city. I guess that for me is the key issue, right? It's like we're limited to small groups for gathering, and you know, how do we start to think about how we can like bring back the qualities of the city, that interaction, that spontaneity, you know, all of that energy that the city has to offer. And how do we do that in a way, in a new context, right? In a new set of pressures. I think that's a really, that's a challenge. And I think I agree with Nikki and Ken and Oscar. Is how do we begin to tackle that issue? And it must be, I think, from both the top down and a bottom up approach, you know, looking at communities and local people and how they want to live and work and act in the city, and then also thinking about how that links into the greater strategic infrastructural questions that sort of Ken was raising, I think. But that's it. I think how do we, you know, reinvent the idea and image of the city, a hyper-dense city in a post-pandemic future? I think it's a serious challenge.
Thanks very much, Don. And how about Jasper and Tina? Do you have anything to add?
So many good comments already, but something I want to add is just that it's really about daring to dream and daring to explore. Like through the work we do, and there's many different types, right? Because Arab is a big firm with many projects, and Matthew and I are involved in many of them. It's really trying to push boundaries. I mean, within our own circles, what do we provide as consultants or as designers to our clients, but what are our clients asking for? And always challenging that, and always trying to do something better. And what you see happening now, at least in my experience, that a lot of time we go for broader conventional solutions, which are not necessarily addressing the issues that are being flagged by some of the other speakers.
Understood. Yeah. And Tina, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I agree with Jasper. We dream about what we can do, and also don't do what we can do. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we will need to end the webinar now, as we are a bit overrun already. But yeah, thanks again for the exchange, especially with expertise, not simply from the architectural field, from the academia, from the urban planning, as well as from the art scene. So thanks very much again for your contribution in the more than a year time, and sparing your tolerance with us, the curator team. And then, yeah, please stay tuned for the next webinar. And of course, let's look forward to the real physical exhibition that will be held in the City Gallery starting in October. Yeah, so I wish all of you have a great summer and hope to see you physically, face to face soon. Okay, stay tuned and bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.